and other speakers. The mayor was there of Cohoes, New York, and he told about how he first became interested in politics, and another guy was a fireman, and he said he actually went to college to learn how to be a fireman and so forth. And I told the kids, when I was 10 years old, God told me, you're going to be a missionary to the Philippines. Now, can you imagine? There were some Muslims in some of those classes. There were some atheists in some of those classes. And when I say, I knew when I was 10 years old that I was going to be a missionary to the Philippines because God told me, suddenly their entire world view is shifted. And they realized there is a God because he talked to this guy, and look what happened as a result. Thousands of kids ended up going through school. And over 30 kids would be dead now if it wasn't for the work we're doing overseas, because we started a medical fund that rescued them because they couldn't afford medical help. And there are children who would still be on the sidewalks being attacked by the prostitutes, the homosexuals, the drug dealers, the people who like to hurt children on the sidewalk. Now we have an orphanage for them. And these kids sitting in that class are saying, there is a God, because he spoke to his heart and he directed him on what he should do. So God directs us. But a second thing he does is while he's directing us, he protects us along the way. I told a missionary in the Philippines who's worried because he's running out of funds. I said, listen, if God has called you there, God's will, done God's way, in God's timing, will never lack for God's supply. He will always provide. Sometimes at the last minute, but nonetheless, God will provide. God's missionaries are protected. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. I have to tell you, these two words together are probably the most beautiful in the entire Bible. The words Jesus and tired, right next to each other. Jesus is God. God is omnipotent, all-powerful. God could create the entire universe in 6 days. How could God be tired? He wasn't tired on the seventh day. He rested because he just stopped creating so he could show us what it means to rest. He didn't have to rest. God never gets tired. How could Jesus be tired? He's God. And yet, he loves us so much. He was willing to put away his untired ability and become tired for us. In fact, undieability, and be nailed to a cross for us. How beautiful these two words are together. Jesus, tired as he was, came down to be tired for us. Well, God protects us as we're traveling from one point to another. Traveling from New York, traveling from Pennsylvania, all the way over to the other side of the planet. It's not an easy thing to do. You know, the first time we came back from the U.S., PJ was very young. Abby wasn't born yet. We had to get to a family reunion right here in Oriental, Liverpool area of Pennsylvania. I only had 3 days to do it. So I rented a car and started to drive. PJ almost died on the way. He had asthma. He was coughing. I said, I got to get to Pennsylvania. He wants to come to this beautiful place called Pennsylvania, the Promised Land. But we understand that God helped us along the way. As we were traveling back to the Philippines, that was a challenge. We get to Seattle, and that time we flew to Seattle. And when we were there, we were waiting for our luggage to come down the belt. And it didn't come. A big crunching sound happened. And then we saw all of my clothes going down the conveyor belt at the airport. And hundreds of people are getting to see what we wear. It's a good thing we washed our clothes in New York before we got on the plane. But nonetheless, God will protect us. Another friend of mine, his suitcases didn't make it. He was on one plane. His luggage was on another plane. And the plane with his luggage in it crashed. In God's wisdom, he filled up that plane with everybody except my friend Bernie, so that Bernie and his wife would be safe. They didn't mind having to buy new clothes because they were alive. God will protect you as he leads you where he wants you to go. And once you get there, you're still not done with your journey yet. You need to reach the people for Christ. Living in another country is not an easy thing, especially in the Philippines when there's no snow. There's nothing, no cold to kill the bugs. As a result, the bugs get bigger and bigger and bigger. We got some big bugs over there. The challenge is, it's nice if the bugs are under logs or behind the walls, But when they end up in your coffee cup, that's a challenge. Now we have this coffee mug, and it's a practical joke mug. You've probably seen them. It has pictures of a ladybug on the outside, and when you get to the bottom of the cup, it's got a ceramic ladybug on the bottom. And you're like, one time I was drinking it, I saw the ladybug, but it wasn't a ladybug. I realized it was a whole different mug, and there was a lizard at the bottom of the cup. And I had drunk the whole cup of coffee, so I think it was lizard juice. And another time, Abby had half a lizard in her cereal. Now you can use your imagination for that one. But nonetheless, God will protect you as He leads you to the place He's calling you to. So there is the commute. The next part is the contact. Missionaries overcome these inhibitions and prohibitions. Inhibitions are the inner turmoil you have in going to do things that you're not comfortable with. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into town to buy food. Why would Jesus ask a Samaritan woman for a drink? He had to admit, first of all, that he had a need that he could not fill. And for a Jew to say that a Samaritan person was better than him in a way, in that she had something to provide for him, is humility. Jesus, a Jew, had a need. He was thirsty, and she had water and could fill that need. This is overcoming an inhibition, saying, it doesn't matter about my feelings. God's calling is more important than my feelings. There was a time that we were on our way home from downtown, and we had just bought groceries, and we had bags of groceries in the back of the pickup truck, and PJ and Abby were in the back seat. We stopped for gas. You can't pump your own gas there. They have to pump it for you, like in New Jersey. So they pumped our gas, and I paid them, and then all of a sudden, Elvie was gone. And I said to the kids, "Where's Mom?" I said, "She's out on the sidewalk over there with those two poor kids." There were two kids, dirt all over their faces. They looked like something from a Charles Dickens novel. And I sat down next to her after I parked the pickup. I said, "What's going on?" She said, "These two kids, called the Onion Boy and the Garlic Girl, one of them had a backpack full of onions, the other one had a backpack full of garlic, and they were selling the garlic because they couldn't go to school. They don't have any money for school. School's not free in the Philippines. You got to pay for it. They had no money. So the dad and mom said, you're going to help the family by selling produce during the day." Well, they sold the whole backpacks full of onions and garlic, got 120 pesos, or about $3 for their day's work, and then they lost the money. And they said, "We can't go home because Dad is going to beat us. And we don't want Papa to beat us. We're not going to be able to sleep. We're going to have welts all over our bodies. So we can't go home. We have to sleep outdoors tonight." And Elvie said, "Can we bring them home?" I'm like, "Can I bring a kitten home? And we're going to kidnap these two kids. We're going to be caught and sent to jail. You really want us to take these kids home?" She says, "No. Got a whole bunch of bags full of groceries. We're going to make dinner for them. Come on, let's make them for them too." So we brought them home. Now, we live in a 6th grade classroom in the school. So when they saw us pull into this enormous building with 4 stories, they thought we were rich and lived in a mansion, but you realize that's a school. And they came into the school, and we made dinner for them, and we fed them so they were just popping and full. And then Elvie gave them 120 pesos, said, "You go home. Tomorrow morning you can come back, and we're going to put you through the school for free." Cool. The next day they came back. Onion Boy, his name is actually Jeffrey, the Garlic Girl, the dad, the mom, the brother, the sister, the other brother, the other sister. We got 6 kids as a result of stopping by to pick up those kids on the side of the road near the gas station. We had overcome oh, by the way, Jeffrey, he was the best runner on the track team. I think he's used to running away from the police, and so he just knows how to run. But I made the mistake of touring them around the school and through my office because on Wednesday night during prayer meeting we took an offering and the treasurer wasn't there, and I put the offering bag in my office, and after I toured the kids through my office, the offering bag was empty. But I asked the treasurer, "How much do we usually get on Wednesday night?" I just paid for it myself. I said, "Chalk it up to experience." But the idea there was that we're overcoming the inhibitions of saying, these kids, they're dirty, they're dingy. We might have problems if we kind of venture into why this kid beating and so forth. Instead, we said, okay, let's overcome that inhibition and say, what can we do to solve this problem? Sometimes that even gets into prohibitions. The Samaritan woman said to him, you are a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. It's not saying it's illegal, but if you associate too much with Samaritans, people are going to say, you're unclean. You're not a good person. In fact, most Jews, if they have to go through a Samaritan area, they will carry their own basket. They will carry their own things so that they don't even have to go near the villages in Samaria because the people are considered so unclean to the Jews. In fact, her bucket would be considered unclean. The water in the bucket would be considered unclean. And of course, the woman herself would be considered unclean. And even to a greater extent, she had had 5 husbands who either died or divorced her or something, but they weren't with her anymore. And now she was with somebody, she was living with somebody that she wasn't even married to. So this woman was definitely unclean. And she was surprised that he was willing to overcome that society looking at him in a different way because he was associating with her for the sake of a divine appointment. There was one time I was going to the post office. We don't usually get our mail at the school because people might steal the mail. If we had a mailbox, they might think, oh, it's a school, there's a foreigner there, maybe there's money in the letters. So we get our mail at the post office. I was going to the post office once, and I got my letters, and I was about to get back into the car, and then I felt somebody tug at my barong. This is a barong. It's made out of pineapple fibers. And he tugged at my barong, and he says, Americano, give me money. It's words that we're familiar with. And I said, you know what? About lunchtime. You guys hungry? Oh yeah, gutom kaayo. I'm very hungry. Give me money for food. I said, no, I want to bring you to the restaurant. I said, oh, we can't do that. They don't let us in the restaurant. I said, there's one right over there. Come on. Now, you got to understand, every place of business has a security guard with a big shotgun at his side in the Philippines. It's kind of a culture shock for us to come back. I'm not speaking for NRA or anything right now, but there's guns everywhere there. It kind of protects you because we got a lot of terrorists there. So anyway, we get to the chicken restaurant. There's this guard with his uniform on and this enormous sawed-off shotgun. He says, you're not coming in here. Let's think this one through. Why don't you want these, there were 3 boys. Why don't you want these 3 boys to come into this restaurant? Because these kids, they put their faces against the big plate glass window and they drool. And they put their nose up like a little pig and they look at people and stare at them while they're eating. And it makes it very uncomfortable for the customers. And then as soon as they come out of the restaurant, they beg for money. If we let them in the restaurant, they're going to beg for money in the restaurant. Kid, promise you won't beg? Okay, they're not going to beg. And how do you get paid? Your salary comes from people who are customers here. You have 4 customers. I'm not eating here if those 3 boys aren't eating here. Okay, let them in. Oh, as soon as they're on the other side of the glass. They've never been on the inside of the glass before. They're on the other side of the glass. They're looking around, smelling all the smells of the restaurant. All of the people behind the counter, the workers and the fry bin and so forth, they come up because they're seeing these little kids are on the other side of the glass, on their side. And I order them all meals. We all get the same thing. They can't read, and they see the pictures, and they want what I'm eating. We sit there at a table, boy 1, 2, 3, and me, the 3rd boy. And we're eating away, and I said, wait a second, before we start, we'll pray. Thank God for the food He provided. Dear Jesus, thank you for this food and for these 3 boys. Amen. Now, I asked the kids while they were eating, the mouth was full of rice and fish. I said, so where do you come from? Now, there's 3 people groups in the Philippines. 102 million peoples all fall into 3 different categories. There is the Catholics. And I asked a Catholic priest once, there's 102 million people. How many of them are Catholic? He said, everybody, 100%. I said, I'm not Catholic. He said, potential Catholic. I said, well, anyway, there's 3 people groups. There's the Catholics. Way back when the place was first populated, the tribal people came in. So there's the tribal people from the mountains that my wife is descended from. And then there's also the Muslims that came into the Philippines after persecution in Indonesia in the 1400s. So we got these 3 people groups. And what do you know? Boy number 1 was a Muslim. Boy number 2 was a Catholic, and sure enough, he guessed it.